Hello and welcome to the KOFISI Connect podcast, your source for a wealth of roundtable discussions on the workplace and business, as well as cultural news and trends from the diverse and dynamic continent of Africa. I'm your host, Sam Imende, and today I'm very pleased to introduce my guest, Cece Ojany-Bekhor and Daniel Orenge. Today we'll be discussing men's wellness, focusing on mental health and mindfulness, and the role that plays in our lives and just our career development as well. So I'll start with ladies first. Cece, you're a certified business coach that I've known for a few years now, with a unique and effective approach on how you engage clients. You've labeled your brand the main protagonist coaching. What does that mean?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for the invite. It's good to be here with you both. I've been working now as a leadership and well-being coach and business coach for just over 10 years. I do one-on-one coaching. I run trainings in organizations virtually and face-to-face. And I actually identify as a creative. I try to live my life creatively, run my business creatively. And so the main protagonist is the main person in a story. And I wanted to invite my listeners and my clients to see themselves as the main protagonist in the story of their lives. So you, Daniel, are the main protagonist in the story of your life. Sam, you're the main protagonist in the story of your life. And the first time I registered the business name, I thought, is this corny? Is this too complicated? But then I ran a workshop shortly after I registered my business name. And that workshop was for women. And at the end of the workshop, there was a lady who came up to me. We're still friends till today. Her name is Sarah. And I didn't know Sarah at the time. And Sarah said to me, you know, when you were explaining the name of your business, I realized that in my life, I've been playing the sidekick. She was always the one helping. She's always the one helping people with their businesses. Like, her ideas are never the ones that she puts time, effort, and energy into. And that was over 10 years ago, and I took that as a sign. So I kept the business name.
I like this.
Yeah.
Very good. And so, Daniel, as the main protagonist in your story, give us a little bit of background to yourself and how you ended up in kind of a wellness career.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me here.
Welcome.
Great. So, based on today's context,
Yes.
I'm a recovery champion. Yeah. I do a lot of support in the journey of recovery from substance use disorder. I'm a wellness enthusiast. I have actually seen the lovely side of life on the other side of the coin. And I always want to pull everyone to this side, the side of mental wellness. So obviously this sits upon my story of alcoholism, chronic addiction. You know, at times when people hear the word alcoholic, they think it's a habit. It's not a habit. It's a chronic addiction. And I was stuck in it for about 12 years. I'm turning 40, so you can imagine it ate a chunk of the years I should have been building, you know. And obviously that's some of the things that many men battle with: lost time, lost opportunities. Yeah. So having gotten out of addiction, I'm now heading to 4 years clean. I don't call myself a recovering. I consider myself recovered because I have been able to undo a lot of learning that was given to me into my subconscious that has been fighting a lot in the conscious realm, that at times would make you feel like you're missing out, and yet you're not. So once you attain that consciousness, once you're able to clean up everything that has been deposited in you by media, by family, I consider that now recovered. So through my journey of the last 4 years, I've seen tremendous growth in my life. And from that, hence my enthusiasm with wellness, and why I'm very glad to be here to share a few things here and there that I've learned along the way.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And I think that's
awesome.
Really kind of powerful. And that's why we kind of have these sessions to tell our stories. because so many people relate to different parts of that story. And so I was excited to bring you on board to show a bit of that journey and just as well as how that connects to not just fitness, wellness, mindfulness, but just living a full life and getting that back. I also can relate to quite a few things. I'm a fitness enthusiast. I've been on also a journey in my wellness has been sobriety. I've been sober for 4.5 years. So that's part of it. I won't go into bad details on that, but that's also a journey in my wellness. And I have the exciting opportunity to head up our wellness program that we're trying to roll out to KOFISI. This is KOFISI, our flex work spaces. Wellness is one of the pillars of our hospitality. And we define wellness along 5 dimensions. There's probably more, but for us, there's a physical element that has to do with nutrition and fitness. There's emotional and mental wellness, which we'll focus on today. That's your kind of mind and soul. And then we also have, thirdly, environmental, the space, especially as a co-working space. We're very conscious of, having spaces that are inspired by a wellness lifestyle, whether it's plants, natural light, airflow. Social, when we can touch on some of the activities we have planned with your team, especially around our membership programming, and then occupational, which of course, Cece, you delve in quite a bit on your personal development, trainings, and all of those are centered around how to be the best version of yourself and to be productive, which is I think a big inspiration for everyone who wants to get up in the morning and feel like, look, there's a sense of purpose, there's a sense of kind of fulfillment, and that stems from a lot of these underlying issues. There's a term, Cece, you talk a lot about in some of your storytelling, and authentic leadership. How would you define, say, authentic leadership and how it might relate to wellness around mental wellness or some of those aspects?
Yeah, thanks for asking the question. I would even add another dimension, which is spiritual. And for me, spiritual doesn't mean religious. Yeah. So I've actually met atheists who are spiritual. I've coached atheists who are spiritual. And so one of the reasons I focus, on authenticity is because it takes a lot of energy to pretend to be someone you're not. And that actually contributes to many of the mental health problems that we experience. That internal, that internal tension that we all feel when we're not being authentic. And so for me, being authentic was a source of my liberation. And I just felt that this is something a lot of people might want to know more about. And so I also just want to clarify that, being your best self, being your authentic self doesn't mean you're perfect. That's not what it means. In this context of men's health and well-being, for example, when I hear about your story, Daniel, it's perfectly normal to go through what is called catabasis. A catabasis is a deep, dark hole. And all our favorite movies have the main protagonist and the sidekicks going into a cave. You have to go into a cave to find something. So, for example, a movie like The Lord of the Rings, they all had to go into this cave. That's a metaphor for the deep, dark hole that many of us, holes that many of us slip into in life. And what a lot of people don't understand in movies is if there's a dragon in the cave, and the dragon is usually sitting on what?
A castle or?
No, what's the dragon? What's the dragon sitting? When you go deep down into the cave, what is the dragon usually sitting on?
I don't know.
You guys don't watch movies?
We watch kids' movies. What am I missing?
The dragon is usually, excuse me. The dragon is usually sitting on precious gems, gold, money, jewels,
treasure,
right?
Okay.
Get you.
A lot of people make the mistake of thinking that you have to kill the dragon to get its jewels.
Yeah.
But that's not what's happening. Yeah, the dragon is a metaphor for all your demons. And if you can kill that dragon, then all those riches are yours. And riches means fulfillment, mental health, the brighter side of life, close friends, love, family. That's what that means. And so what you need when you go down into that dark place is you need a guide or guides, you need friends, and you need to respect the dragon. You need to respect the dragon. Otherwise, you're not going to get out of there alive. Yeah, so it's really exciting, Daniel, that you've gotten out of there alive. Because when you come out of the cave, you're a different person.
Yeah.
You're an elevated version of yourself.
Yeah.
And so it's very important for people to understand that life is full of ups and downs, and that is okay. Yeah. That is part of your authentic journey. Sometimes the dark places, the caves, we jump into them with our choices. But other times you're pushed into it. So for example, the years that have just passed, the pandemic years that have just passed, we were all pushed into that, right? And so authenticity is being true to yourself. So for example, what do I really want to do with my life? What sorts of people do I want to hang out with? How do I want to spend my free time? Yeah, so for example, I'm a mom. I have one daughter. My husband and I have one daughter. And some women will ask me, they'll ask me, Cece, Ojany shouldn't be by herself. You should have another kid. You should have another kid. And I just laugh because I get where that's coming from. But for me, authentically speaking, right now, I'm cool with one kid.
Yeah.
So that's an example of authenticity. There's absolutely nothing wrong with employment. For me, I got to a stage where being authentic meant starting my own business. So authenticity looks different for different people. And when you're being authentic, you're not spending a lot of energy pretending to be someone you're not. And that energy can then be fed into your projects, your love life, your physical health, etc., etc. So that's where, for me, the authenticity is so important. And it's a wellspring. It's a wellspring, meaning you can be authentic at 13 years old. It looks different to being authentic at 33. It looks different to being authentic at 63. Why? Because you're constantly learning. You're constantly growing. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And, to that point, it starts from a level of awareness, a self-awareness, even when you go through those dark caves. The recognition, I think especially as men, you can kind of stay there for so long. At what point does that reality, of course in sobriety they might call it rock bottom, or just a moment of truth moment that you say, okay, wherever I'm headed, this is headed just
to an even darker place.
To a dark place. Maybe Daniel, you can weigh in there. But what moment how was your journey in terms of finding yourself and just a level of self-awareness to say, hey, I need to course correct, or I need to kind of find myself and live authentically according to my values?
I like what Cece said. She said, sometimes you can take yourself into the cave. Sometimes you'll be pushed in, So, like for one of the things, like when you look at substance use disorder, like alcoholism, it's very scary to think about living a life without it. It's like a prisoner who's about to be released. He doesn't fancy, it's scary to live out there. You're used to a particular life. So that definitely would mean I lived in denial. And many alcoholics live in denial for the fear, and we pretend that we are fine, that we have it under control. Yeah. But, the more you do that, the deeper you sink. So I'm grateful there are contributing factors that permitted me to go in. And like Cece, I have 5 kids. I have kids. 2 are courtesy of my sobriety. The third one heavily influenced me going into to get help. So for me, where I realized this is enough was the family pillar. Because I remember my dad telling me, if I drank alcohol, I wouldn't pay your fees. You'll get to a point in your life where you need to choose. So when I lost my job at a fintech where I was working for, finally, the company that I had stayed in for over 3 years, and I actually had got into a position of head of sales. When I lost that opportunity is when I knew something must change. Yeah. Good thing is a seed had been planted in my mind by my sister who told me, hey, you should try rehab. So I was willing to try whatever it takes. And for me, why rehab made sense is because, number one, it's better to be away from the substance in an enclosed environment. So I was willing to try it out rather than be at home and jobless and children going to school, which would have led to more disaster. So many men get to that junction where they have to make some decisions. And I think it's how stubborn you are that keeps you still in the same hole. Yeah. So for me, that I thought about it and reflected and said, no, I deserve better in this life. I don't know if rehab works, but I'll give it a try. So I didn't have anybody who held my hand then. That's one of the reasons why I do this. So I went and found out what this is really about, what I'm struggling with, why I'm struggling with this. But one of the things when I went into rehab is something I caught from a movie. And this gentleman said that success is not a destination, it's a daily routine. So I was like, what does he mean by daily routine? So for me, I started thinking around it. What should I do daily? So I knew there's a spiritual discipline, there's a physical discipline, there's an intellectual discipline. So I summed that up and I said, I'm going to do this every day. Little did I know I was walking into wellness. Yeah. And that was my formula, and that's been my formula every day. So whenever I sit down with any individual who is going through a tough time, we can talk, but eventually I'll check on those pillars. Because if one of them is amiss, that's where the problem is, and that's where we deal with it.
Yeah, the consistency around those habits.
Those habits. Wellness definitely needs some element of structure.
Yeah.
It needs some element of structure.
For sure, that's been my...
One of the other things that is very insightful for people is we have those addictions that, there's stigma around them and people don't want to be seen as that. But then there are the addictions that are approved of. So some people are numbing with alcohol, but some people are numbing by over-gymming, overworking, over-sexing, over-indulging, over-eating. Yeah. So it's very important not to look at other people and go, I've got my drinking under control. What other addictions? It's the addictions that are super duper dangerous are the ones that make us go, that's great, you're working so hard, I love it. I remember one former client of mine said, we were talking about this, and she said to me, Cece, I'm single, I don't have a family, but I see married people coming into this office. So she arrives at the office at 7, she's in banking. She finds some people there, and when she leaves late at night, those people are still there. And she asks herself, like on a daily, and she's just wondering, is this person running away from something?
Yeah. That's exactly kind of the question I was leaning into, is what other signs or coping mechanisms do we see, especially amongst men, that are signs that, hey, they're covering. There's some kind of issue that they're hiding behind it. There's escape, right?
Yes.
There's escape. So that whether that's overworking, whether that's other forms of addiction, whether that's just even you can see a level of stress being easily triggered, angry, easily triggered, and that carries over. If you'll pick it up, especially if we have kids, so that energy you bring into the house, how is that perceived, picked up on, and it's just a kind of a domino effect. But how, especially maintaining society's maybe version of masculinity and being strong, how does that conflict with just being open about, hey, I'm struggling with this in this area? Cece, you work with both men and women. How do you find men approach you or come to you with, hey, yes, it can be a negative thing. Otherwise, it just might be a career stage that they're trying to get through. But what's your experience been in?
Yeah, it's been really, really fun and enlightening working with men. So how I started, excuse me, how I started working with men is when I first started my business, this was a completely random decision. It wasn't logical. I just thought, well, it'll probably be women who come to me for coaching. So I started coaching women about their career. Then I realized we need to talk about life outside of work as well. And then a few months in, I realized, but there's no reason why I can't be working with men as well. And then a male business coach based in the UK told me, you can work with men as well. And I said, thank you for saying that because I've been thinking about it. And then in terms of the workshop, so I ran I used to run mixed workshops for all genders, and then it became men only, women only. And the men only workshop, Authentic Leadership for Men, it came about because I kept saying to my clients, don't you have spaces? Aren't there spaces where you can gather with men like you? And they'd be like, no, there aren't any. Aren't there spaces? And the sorts of clients I attract may not necessarily be attracted to ultra-religious spaces. Yeah. And so after repeating that sentence over and over, aren't there spaces? Aren't there spaces? And I said, okay, I'll try and find you some spaces. I realized, well, maybe I need to create a space. So that's how the Men Only workshop started. And what's so amazing is it's packed every time. I've only taken a break this year because I was writing a book. And so I don't want to be long-winded about it, but it's very important to understand history. It's very important to understand your history. Yeah. And here in a country like Kenya, and for all the listeners, it's important to think about your history and the country you're from. I've had this exact conversation I have had with Irish men, particularly. What colonialism did to all of us, but especially to men. Yeah. If you want to take over a country, you first have to break the men. Yeah. You have to break the family group. Yeah. Yeah. Wangari Maathai has written many books, the Kenyan Nobel laureate, one of our heroines. And in one of her books, she talked about how the idea of the pub, the bar, it's very important for people to understand that is an introduced idea. Africans, or at least Kenyans, did not go to a specific place, pay money just to sit there and drink. Alcohol was consumed responsibly. Yeah. Only certain people could consume the alcohol. Yeah. It was made fresh. So that's the first thing you need to understand. The pub is an introduced idea. That's mind-blowing. Actually, now, it's mind-blowing, right?
So ingrained, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So now I have no issue with alcohol because many people consume it healthily. It's the overindulgence that's a problem, right, Daniel? It's the overindulgence that's a problem. So it's things like that you need to be aware of. And then you also have to ask yourself, whose rules am I following, and do these rules work for me? So, for example, I like to say to my male clients, women, not all women, of course, but somewhere along the line, women realized, hang on, we don't want to be sex objects. And older women started educating younger women about that. But I'm not sure if men are being educated on, you don't have to be a success object. You don't have to be a walking, talking ATM. Yeah, you don't have to be.
Yeah.
So you've got to ask yourself, these societal rules, and societal rules are necessary. Drive properly, don't be rude, and all of this. But some rules just don't make any sense. Be strong, don't cry.
Yeah.
Why? What does that mean? And is that helpful for me? That's a very important question to ask.
Yeah.
There are a number of books that I recommend to all my male clients. Books like Raising Boys by Stephen Biddulph. Books like The Way of the Superior Man by David Deida. Books like Iron John, I-R-O-N John by Robert Bly. Knights Without Armor, Knights, K-N-I-G-H-T-S by Aaron Kipnis. I would love for an African man to write a book for African men.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you know any, please let me know. But what I love about those books is they talk about the importance of men expressing themselves fully.
Yeah.
And one framework I like to teach my clients is the framework of archetypes. An archetype is a universal pattern of human behavior. So, for example, it doesn't matter where in the world you go.
Yeah.
The rebel is an archetype.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't matter where in the world you go, what village, which town. The martyr is an archetype. So the 4 key archetypes for men are the king, the warrior, the lover, and the magician. Yeah. And simply put, you ask yourself, when a king is healthy in mind, body, spirit, how does he behave? When a warrior is healthy in mind, body, spirit, how does he behave? When the lover is the part of you that loves life, the romantic, spontaneous, fun side of you. Yeah. When that is healthy, how do you behave? Yeah. And then the magician is the part of you that creates something out of nothing. So for founders, for example, when you found a business, that's your inner magician. It's the perfect way to express your inner magician. But any project you come up with. So if I can just give one example of the king, for example. When a king is healthy, he has wise advisors. So for all the men who are listening to this, you want to ask yourself, who are your wise advisors? You have to respect your advisors. You can't be surrounded by yes men and yes women, right? Yeah. When the king is healthy, he is thoughtful, he is decisive. So you have to ask yourself, am I being thoughtful and decisive when I'm leading my teams? Am I being thoughtful and decisive in my home? Now, it's also important to understand that these archetypes exist on a spectrum. What that means is, on one hand, on one side, you have the boy king. The king, the healthy king, is right at the center. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have the dictator, right? And this is where people get confused, because the dictator has elements of the king in him. It's a spectrum. And that's why people get confused by the dictator, because the dictator can be well-spoken. The dictator might be charismatic. Yeah, the dictator might say some things that make you go, actually, I do agree with what he's saying. And then he starts rambling on about other stuff, and you're like, wait, hold on a second. Now you've lost me. So that's how people get confused, right? Yeah. The boy king is the person who is not really in charge. Somebody else is controlling him. Yeah. Usually, it's a male relative or his mother. Now, this might all sound like theory, but we know people who are like this. We know healthy leaders. We know dictators and despots. We also know boy kings. And I remember a former client, when I shared this with him, he said, there was a young guy I was mentoring once, and he was 28 years old, still living at home. And he said to him, you need to move out of home, man. You need to move out of home. Yeah, your inner king can never come out. Yeah. If your mom and dad are, paying for everything, and you just have to walk into the house and raid the fridge, you remain the boy king. There's nothing wrong with being a prince. There's nothing wrong with being a prince. Yeah, because the prince just means your dad is the king, and that's healthy.
Yeah.
But the boy king is you're just not in charge.
Wow.
And so with all these archetypes, you use them to inspire your thoughts and your actions. So let me stop there.
Yeah, I think it's useful to have these frameworks and analogies
absolutely.
to map out and not get pigeonholed. Because I think one thing is it's easy to kind of stay in your comfort zone, right? Whether that's being at home or when money's good. When money's down, you know that's when the cracks start to surface, especially as a brand. You're like, what is going on? And so how to be in those spaces. And I think serenity is a word I like to use, is how to maintain either contentment or serenity in those challenging situations. What gives you that peace of mind? What gives you that kind of stability through it? One thing, is also important is helping service, helping others.
Being selfless.
Being selfless in that, because a lot of these pressures turn you inwardly, and then you get just caught in your
You become self-absorbed.
Yeah, self-absorbed. So in terms of service, I mean, Daniel, maybe you could share a little bit about how your journey in terms of then not only working on yourself through these habits, but how have you been able to be of service, or what do you look to support others? And in my journey, I've also learned that helping others actually does more for me, as much for me as it does for others. Yeah. So, just give us a few highlights in your story.
Yeah, there's. Cece mentioned that many people are, consuming alcohol responsibly, and the problem is the overindulgence. Mm-hmm. And when I look at my story, there was a reason for overindulgence, and that's what we always need to deal with if we're going to get out of any addiction. And so we're basically saying that we have many men walking around with underlying issues stemming from childhood. Mm-hmm. One of the things I like to say is that, I know I was daddy's boy, but daddy also had his underlying issues. So daddy was present but absent. Mm-hmm. So that created a void that was filled later on in life by alcohol. And I was busy trying to justify myself to my friends, to my peers, by trying to drink more, to drink a lot, to prove that I am a man, to prove I'm this. And little did I know I was going down that slippery slope. So I feel we talked about healthy spaces, and healthy spaces are there, but men are so conditioned. Yeah. Men are so conditioned. Like, our perception of what manhood is leading us to our own destruction. Yeah. It's whatever social media is telling us out there. So you find men are very guarded, even if they find a safe space. And that's one of the reasons why I started thinking, of course, right now, religion has already been tainted. So even the introduction of it already puts a barrier. Yep. So, some of the initiatives that we think work for men is fitness. Yeah. It's easier to bring a man to the gym than to church. Mm-hmm. So once you bring him into the gym, and then you're able to form a bond, and men bond through doing hard things together, and then our walls are able to break. Mm-hmm. When I got sober, doesn't mean my problems went away. As a matter of fact, they became more clear. And one of the challenges can also be marital challenges, and you find that through your whole marriage, you are coping and sweeping things under the rug, and yet you as a couple should have been dealing with them. So, for example, my wife and I could have a fight in the morning or in the evening, and I'm very angry. I'm very, very angry because I feel intimidated. I feel disrespected, So what does Daniel in the past do? Drink a whole half or smoke some marijuana and go to bed and wake up and go to work. Nothing has been resolved. Mm-hmm. Daniel version 2 or upgraded version will call his friend, tell his boy, this is what mama has done. Speak about it for 10 minutes. With there even not being a solution, the problem is already half solved. And the gentleman, and that's why it's very important, as you mentioned, it's very important that you have wise counsel around you. Somebody will tell you, hold up, it's not only you, but you too have this issue. Then Daniel will sleep better and wake up, and Daniel will go to exercise and reflect upon it, and Daniel will go to work and be more productive. And in the evening, Daniel will speak to Mama from a point of wisdom. So those are some of the things that I try to pull men into doing. When you mentioned about the service I'm doing, besides sharing content and coming up here, because vulnerability is very important. And I cannot come and give you some sort of guidance or advice if you already don't know my weakness.
Yes.
Many men are not only struggling with alcoholism, many men are struggling with pornography. In today's age, when you look at social media, there's a reason why there's too much sex that is being displayed there. It's because too many people are feeding on pornography, and they know this will pull their eye. Little do people know that these things do cause a low in your life. And that low sometimes is unexplainable, and eventually somebody would consider suicide. So I like to be honest about my story of alcoholism. I've also gone through challenges with pornography, and I like to explain give some of the formulas that I've been given as a way out. It might not work for you, but you could borrow an idea from here and there. So some of the initiatives I'm doing right now, I'm very fortunate to be the head of business for a company by the name A-Fusion, One People, One Dance. Our CEO, Chiki Kuruka, started it. She formed an African dance curriculum. So my work is to bring African dance into all spaces possible as a wellness initiative, from schools to fitness centers and even into the corporate space. Because people spend most of their time at work. So we're trying to bring fitness and winding sessions where you can get fit and have fun at the same time, break the monotony of work, let loose. And this benefits the company, definitely, and it also benefits the individual, which obviously benefits the home. So that's one of the things we're doing. Besides that, I'm also working with a rehab where I do coaching, because one of the challenges I realized, if you do not have a face of sobriety in a recovery center, the work of the counselors and professionals is it's difficult. Because you cannot relate. You cannot relate. You're giving me theoretical opinions. So I go in to break the ice. And then from there, we work hand in hand with, so I work with this rehab called the Mind Spa. I love it because the lady is very invested into pouring into addicts. She has even brought in an instructor who brought me, a friend of mine, who trains them twice a week. They have spiritual nourishment. Then now there's me who comes, and I'm able to speak on a few things. Another thing I like to speak about is purpose. Many people are living a life that is unfulfilled. There's that void. And the question would be, how? How do I get to do that? And that's why we say once you implement the principles or the pillars of wellness, one of them is, what is your gift? That's one of the things I've found, that if you're not doing anything about your gift, there's a void. There's a void. And for me, I did, needless to say, I did a lot of voiceover in my years of addiction, but it never thrived till I got sober. So many people would look at their gift and say, I can paint, so what? Well, it's not really about what it'll do for you in terms of a living, but in terms of the fulfillment it gave you, because your maker put it there for you. So it's very important that these are some of the things I teach people, that please unearth your gift, start using it over the weekend, bond with it. You never know what it will do for you. So those are just a few of the initiatives that I'm taking up on, especially as a coach on this journey.
I think there's just on that, I want to lead into you, because he said something about that spiritual journey. What's interesting is that once you, initially we said, religion, church, and purpose is usually not the first thing, right? You're usually, there's barriers, you've created blocks to those things. But as you open up, as you become vulnerable, and open yourself up to what are those things? What are those things blocking you? What are those things you're coping with? What those it gets to that spiritual side.
Yes,
So then you're able to find a sense of
open up to
purpose
it,
and kind of find that fulfillment and gift. And it could be, and there's various things going into kind of career, and it could be the environment, it could be the wrong space, it could be just something that's eating you up that you're not awareness. How do you have that self-awareness to be able to say, hey, this is not my calling, this is not where I'm supposed to be, and to gravitate and to move towards that. So I know there's a few points that you mentioned, Cece, you want to jump on, but I know as far as especially that kind of finding a sense of what authentically are you supposed to do and with your gift, if you can kind of hit on some practical points as you share how men get there.
Yeah. So let me answer it like this.
Okay.
there's a few things Daniel said. I love what you're doing with the work that you're doing, and when it comes to working with men in particular, we talk about make it about the legends, not about the laws, because a lot of men are in the world of the laws during your work. Do it like this, do it like that, P&L statement, what's the accountant saying, legal this, legal that. And this is actually one of the reasons a lot of people, but men especially, get really drained. And I have this joke when I say to women, when you're out on a date, just date number one, don't talk about work. It's boring for everybody. It's boring for everybody. So if you really want to get men's attention when you're helping them, make it about the legends. Make it fun, make it about story, make it about romance, make it about the outdoors, make it about doing things, making about, you know what I mean? Just activities and conversation that pulls men out of...
Sort of adventure.
Yeah, exactly. Activities that pull you out of, okay, so what does the investor want? What is the accountant saying? You know, that kind of stuff. The other thing that's important to realize is we can't talk about men without talking about young boys. And here's another thing that a lot of people are not aware of. The question that we ask is, why are boys struggling in school? That is not the right question. The right question is school designed to help boys thrive? And here's the really interesting thing. It's not just boys. There are also some girls, and I was one of these girls, and a lot of my female clients are the same. We were those girls who were like, I am so bored of sitting in this chair and listening to someone, listening to 7 different teachers lecture at me all day, every week, for how many years in a week? 52 weeks. Boys have energy.
Yeah.
They need to be outside. They need to be experimenting.
Yeah.
And I was one of those girls who felt the same. I need to be outside. I need to be experimenting. I need to be shown. So the question is not, why are boys struggling in school? No, it's, is the school system designed to help boys? Okay, that's the first thing you need to ask yourself. On the marital front, we say in coaching, you don't have marital issues. You have childhood issues showing up in your marriage, which is why, you have childhood issues showing up in your marriage, which is why it's very, very important for each of you to get therapy. You can do the couples therapy, but at some point the therapist will say, you know what, I think you each need to come for therapy because you've got your stuff, your spouse has their stuff. Okay. Yeah. When it comes to when you argue, Daniel, Sam, women tend to be, not all women, of course, but we tend to be quite, shall I say, more eloquent and more focused in our words, right? And that can discombobulate a lot of men. And so that's something I talk to my female clients about as well. Yeah. Don't just come at him with words. It ends up being You literally get overwhelmed in your brain.
The timing of that, like, open the door, I just got home.
Words, so many words. right?
Yeah.
And then the other thing to be aware of is this thing of young men, sow your wild oats, sow your wild oats. When you overindulge in sex, you're actually draining what is called your chi or your prana or your life force energy. And I'll never forget this. I was chatting to a client, a male client, about this, and he said, you know, Cece, he got a job in the Middle East many, many years ago. And he said that was the sharpest he has ever been, because you couldn't indulge in just running around with the local women, and you couldn't overindulge in alcohol. He said that was the sharpest he's ever been. So you conserve your prana, your life force, the thing that activates and motivates and animates you. That's all it is, right?
Yeah.
Now, just a comment about church. We are not anti-church. None of us are. It's just there needs to be some vulnerability and compassion from the church. Things you can't. It doesn't work when you tell people don't do this, do that, don't do this, do that. It doesn't work. Humans are humans. We're complex, we're flawed, but we're also really wonderful. And so I have found that the pastors, for example, that seem to be popular are the ones who can also be vulnerable about the stuff that's going on for them.
Yeah.
You're not sitting on this pedestal
Exactly.
pretending to be perfect. Yeah, so that's really important.
Likewise, yeah. I think that's a huge point. And I think both of you have also been quite open about your stories in the way you help others. You share what you've gone through. You shared your growing up as a high school. This is the person I was. I was overbearing in this area, and that's what led me to understand myself and my strengths. I know we can go on and on different tangents, but just in kind of to sum up in a way, a parting shot. One, you've talked about, one thing we're doing together at KOFISI in a corporate space, because getting people out of their comfort zones or routines is key, right?
Yeah.
Taking men to the forest to have a cookout and talk about these things. Yeah. It's like, wow, okay, in this space, I'm feeling, I can connect, I can open up. So maybe touch slightly more on how we plan to do this at KOFISI through the dance, African dance. Why is that important for both kind of the social and just getting people to connect more? If you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's what Cece mentioned about the pubs being actually an idea that was just introduced.
Yeah,
it really has opened my eyes, because the other day I was looking around and I keep on telling my wife that, look at all these bars, look at all these wines and spirits. Yeah. Who is buying the alcohol? Men. It's not women. It's men. This is a big problem. So it's the option available.
Yeah.
I don't blame them. It's the option. You've been conditioned since you were a child. I mentioned the adverts as I grew up that used to say, Mbili Mbili kama kawaida. It's normal after work, have to go. So we have been conditioned into this. But there's an alternative.
Yeah.
We can do something about it, especially in the corporate spaces. Yeah. Because if you're able to deal with the corporate spaces, you deal with a chunk of the population. So, African dance. The first thing that comes,
it's so awesome.
The first thing that comes to people's mind is, I don't dance, especially men.
Yeah.
I have 2 left feet. Yes, we all do, unless you have been dancing frequently.
Yeah,
we all have 2 left feet, unless you have been dancing. So it's not really about the prowess. It's about coming to engage in something that is African, the cultural aspect of things, the fitness aspect of it, because it's quite vibrant. And then just the capacity to de-stress and wind. And then from there, communities grow because people are able to unwind or cope healthily, have proper, solid conversations, and at the end of the day, go back home. Because I normally say this thing about alcohol. Many friends ask me this question: that is there anything wrong with social drinking? And I go like, hey, don't put me on that stage. But the truth is this: try and leave alcohol for a month or two, and then count your cost. Yeah. There's always a hidden cost. It could be your relationship with your children at home. Yeah. When they need daddy in the morning, on Saturday morning, daddy is not there. Now, how many years have you been drinking socially? But think about daddy who did African dance on Friday night and came home tired and happy, endorphins all over the place.
Yes.
Present for his family. Tomorrow he wakes up, more money still in the bank, able to go do a few things. He'll be like, this is actually good. And daddy is more present, and a more stable father in the home leads to a more stable society. So that's what I'm pushing, and I'm very grateful for KOFISI to give us this platform to have sessions across all your spaces and see how this goes. And I'm sure it'll impact not only the community, but also the co-working space.
Amazing. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And we're looking forward to that. This is our Wellness Month, as I mentioned. So we have Africa Dance. We'll be doing Tuesday at some different centers after hours as one of the ways we're connecting members and also bringing an element of fitness, of culture to that space.
Can I come?
Yes, she's allowed to come. She's allowed to come. Yeah. And that's the thing abroad. I used to dance a lot, and then I came here, and guys are just around the table, and you see brown bottles, and
that's
you're like, and you have to find. There's only 2 places that you can dance. And so I hope, ideally, we're changing that story, changing the options. Yeah. You see so much happening. I wake up and I see people running, cycling, doing all sorts of adventures. So. We want to be able to expose ourselves, our friends, to new ways to, decompress, unwind.
And here's the thing, right? Dance is very different, because I can go cycling, I can go for a jog, but when I'm dancing, because music changes your emotional state immediately. Absolutely. Right? Music changes your emotional state immediately. And I'll just add one more thing, again, about introduced ideas. Look at how colorful we used to be. Look at how colorful African men used to be. Maasai men have braided their hair. They're wearing bright red. I did a workshop in the Maasai Mara for a client for a week, and it culminated in dance by Maasai men and Maasai women, and everybody was mesmerized. Used to wear jewelry, before the rappers made it cool. We were iced before, rappers made it cool. So there's also something about just also remembering that this is not weird. This is not strange. We are dancers. We are colorful people. We are vibrant. So, And
don't take yourself so seriously. Yes. We all go through, there's patches, but, just one thing, and then I close out with Cece. I think it was Simon Sinek or someone who mentioned a lot of times, men, it doesn't take much. Sometimes it's a 2-minute call. I think he has a message on with a friend that says, whenever you just say, I need 8 minutes, it's like a signal.
Yes, Simon. Yes.
Simon Sinek. Yes. So just having a way, men, to communicate SOS, just, you don't need to, always book a full session of therapy, go check into rehab. But sometimes it's just like reset. I just need a reset. I've been in a dark space. Can you chat? And just being that lifeline, and it's important for us to be that lifeline to a lot of our friends.
Very important.
You mentioned a book, just as also a parting shot. I believe it's called "I'll Take Some Love with That."
I'll take some self-love with that.
I'll take some self-love with that.
I'll take some self-love with that.
You don't have it here. I know you don't have it at your workshop.
I don't have it here. There's so many books on my dining room table. I forgot to grab one. And it's a book that all genders can read. So lots of men, male leaders, so excited, have bought the book as well. And the reason why I gave the book that name is because I want to invite everybody to just whatever you're doing, take some self-love with that. In your business, take some self-love with that, with your kids, when you're making money, when you're just everything you do, just take some self-love with that.
Nice.
Yeah. It's available now. You
Fantastic.
can DM me.
Take some love with that. I think that's the parting shot, because taking care of yourself, taking care of your mental health, taking care of your wellness is having some love for yourself.
Yeah.
Taking some love with that. So encourage
And
all
it leads to success.
Yes.
Yes.
Leads
This
to
is not a
success.
woo-woo conversation.
Yes,
It leads to success.
Yes, we are in the business of helping people be their best versions of themselves, which ultimately leads to success, right?
Yeah.
It's not it's a symptom, not kind of the cause of it. So thank you both for being on this podcast today, and
Thanks for having
this
us.
will hopefully
it's
lead
been
to
amazing.
a few other events and activities. Like I mentioned, both will have the dance workshops happening Tuesdays. We have on the 13th really awesome men's workshop with Cece on wellness as well. So we invite everyone to join us for that. Thanks, Patience and the crew, for helping us plan this. We'll see you guys next time on KOFISI.
Thank you so much.